I was only 15 when my parents abandoned me. At an age where most girls were worried about homework and prom, I was holding a newborn in my arms and staring at black trash bags piled on my family's porch. My parents had promised to help me when they first found out I was pregnant. Those words, "We'll help you take care of it," were the only reason I didn't give up. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. I was born into a house that looked perfect on the outside. A neat lawn, my dad's polished car in the driveway, my mom's flowers blooming under the window. But inside, it wasn't as pretty. My parents cared about appearances more than anything. They didn't want neighbors gossiping or family whispering. I learned quickly that feelings were messy and unwanted. Smiles were for company. Silence was for everything else. Even as a kid, I noticed how conditional their love was. If I got good grades, I earned a pat on the head. If I embarrassed them, even slightly, I was met with cold stares and slammed doors. They weren't violent. Not in the way people imagine. They were worse. They ignored. They dismissed. They made me feel invisible unless I was useful. I learned to shrink myself just to keep the peace. My mom loved to say, "We sacrificed everything for you." But when I looked around, the sacrifices weren't for me. They were for their image. My dance recitals? They only went if they could brag to friends afterward. Birthdays? Polite parties? Pictures taken, then forgotten. I craved warmth, the kind of love my friends had in their families. Sleepovers were like stepping into another world, where parents hugged their kids just because. By the time I was 12, I understood my role. Behave, smile, and don't ask for too much. If I cried, my mother would sigh, "Stop being dramatic." If I asked for help, my father said, "Figure it out, life isn't fair." I carried that with me, and when I finally needed them most, when my whole world was crashing down, I should have known better than to expect anything different. At 15, I was still naive enough to believe in love. My boyfriend was older, charming, and jealous in ways I mistook for passion. He didn't like me talking to other boys, not even teachers. He checked my phone, demanded passwords, sulked if I didn't answer right away. Instead of running, I clung to him. I thought his attention meant I mattered. No one had ever looked at me like I was special before. The night it happened, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't tender. It was about control. He cornered me after I visited my godfather at the hospital. He was furious I hadn't told him first. He said if I really loved him, I'd prove it. My voice cracked when I tried to refuse, but his anger was sharp, dangerous. I was terrified of losing him, of being punished, so I gave in. And that's how I got pregnant. When the test came back positive, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. 15. I was only 15. I remember staring at myself in the mirror, trying to see if I looked different already. I felt sick, like my body had betrayed me. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but who? The boyfriend who disappeared the second I showed him the result? The parents who hated any flaw? I was completely alone. Eventually, I told my mom. I rehearsed it 100 times, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd hug me. She didn't. She sighed, looked me up and down, and finally said, "We'll help you take care of it." For a moment, relief washed over me. My dad just gave a small nod, his face unreadable. I believed them. I wanted to. That sentence kept me going when the whispers at school made me feel like trash. Rumors spread like wildfire. Girls whispered behind my back in hallways. Boys sneered, calling me names I can't forget. They said I trapped him, that I was desperate, that I was ruined. My so-called friends drifted away, embarrassed to be seen with me. Every day was another battle to keep my head down, another night crying into my pillow. But I clung to those words. "We'll help you take care of it." The pregnancy was brutal. My body ached, my back hurt, and I couldn't keep food down for months. I had no one to lean on. My mom didn't come to doctor's appointments. My dad drove me once, said nothing, and waited in the car the whole time. I dropped out of school after the gossip became unbearable. Each kick inside my belly reminded me I was in this alone. Still, I held on to hope. When I went into labor, I prayed my parents would finally show up for me. My mom was there, pacing, scowling, complaining about how long it was taking. My dad sat silently in the corner, scrolling through his phone. I clutched the hospital bed rails, breathing through the pain, telling myself that once my daughter was here, everything would be different. I imagined holding her, surrounded by love. I couldn't have been more wrong. Coming home from the hospital, I carried my baby girl with shaky arms. I remember the soft pink blanket wrapped around her tiny body, her little face scrunching as she whimpered. My heart swelled with fierce protectiveness. But when I opened the front door, I froze. My clothes, my belongings, everything I owned was stuffed into trash bags on the floor. My parents stood there waiting. My mother's eyes were cold. "We're not cleaning up your mess," she said flatly. My dad crossed his arms, silent but firm. I blinked, confused, thinking it had to be a cruel joke. "But you said—" My mother cut me off. "We just said that so you wouldn't get rid of it. Now we're done. You're on your own." Her voice was final, like slamming a coffin shut. I felt the floor disappear beneath me as my newborn cried in my arms. I begged. I fell to my knees sobbing, asking how they could do this to me, to their grandchild. They didn't answer. My mother turned away. My father retreated to the bedroom. I sat there on the floor, shattered, with no idea where to go or how to survive. That was the moment I truly understood what abandonment felt like. They hadn't just turned their backs. They erased me. I was invisible again. With nowhere else to go, I called my Aunt Becky. She sighed heavily but told me to come over. I walked through the night with my baby wrapped tightly against my chest, clutching those heavy trash bags. Every step felt impossible, but I kept moving. I couldn't stop. I had a tiny life depending on me now. By the time I reached Becky's house, my feet were bleeding, but I'd made it. We had made it. Aunt Becky's hallway smelled like bleach and lemon. She pointed to a narrow room with a thin mattress and a rattling fan, then to the clock on the stove. 4:30 wake up, she said. Chores before sunrise. Don't make noise. I nodded because nodding was safer than arguing. I laid my baby on the mattress and watched her tiny chest rise and fall. The fan ticked, counting seconds louder than my heartbeat while the house judged our breathing. I kept going. The first morning, Becky shook my shoulder in the dark. Sheets, floors, dishes, she listed, handing me cracked rubber gloves. I tied my hair back with a shoelace and moved quietly, terrified of waking the baby. When she stirred, Becky's eyebrows rose like storm clouds. I learned to scrub one-handed, to sway a stroller with my foot, to hold my breath when the sink squeaked. Survival became a rhythm. Clean, hush, feed, repeat. I whispered that we would be okay. I kept working. Money was impossible. I sold old toys online and stacked coins in a jar labeled milk. I tore diapers into halves when I had to, praying the tape would hold. I learned grocery math, beans stretch, rice fills, bananas go last. The pediatrician's office had posters of smiling babies. Mine stared at fluorescent lights while I rehearsed questions I was too embarrassed to ask. Becky timed our showers and counted the minutes out loud. I promised myself I would not break. I learned. When the crying was too loud, I walked the porch in circles, whispering songs I made up on the spot. Winter turned my fingers stiff around the bottle. I tucked blankets under the door so heat wouldn't leak. "She'll toughen up," Becky would say, sipping her tea. I nodded and kept pacing because arguing risked the street. In those hours, I learned the shape of the neighborhood's silence and the way fear lives in the throat. I counted breaths until the fear softened. I stayed. The diner saved us. Rosa found me on the steps one night, my baby asleep against my chest, me counting coins for formula. "You need work?" she asked. I did. She showed me the back room where a spare cot sat beside crates of coffee. "She can sleep here," she said, tucking a blanket around the cot. "You study when it's slow." I almost cried. That small kindness felt like a door opening in a burning house. I believed that tomorrow could be kinder. Night shift taught me people's secrets. Truckers with photos taped to dashboards, students muttering over textbooks, nurses catching breath between lives. Rosa taught me the register, the grill, the hand signals we used when my hands were full. "Eyes up," she'd say. "You can be tired later." Between refills, I studied GED worksheets, balancing the pencil on the menu. My daughter dreamed softly behind the door, a steady metronome keeping time with coffee drips. I practiced courage in tiny, quiet ways. I learned the menu like a prayer. Eggs 3 ways, hash browns 4, coffee until the pot hissed dry. I learned which regulars tipped in quarters and which in smiles. Rosa kept a spare pacifier in her apron and a sharp look for anyone who stared too long. "Mind your own," she'd say, and the room would listen. After closing, when the neon sign flicked off, we mopped to the radio. The floor smelled like lemons and second chances. I watched the light shift and kept going. On GED test day, Rosa braided my hair and pressed a granola bar into my hand. "For your brain," she said. I left my daughter with her and sat in a cold classroom filling bubbles until my wrist cramped. Every question felt like a dare. Prove you're more than a statistic. I thought of Becky's timer, my mother's voice, my baby's fingers curling around mine. When the proctor called time, I exhaled and dared to imagine a different future. I treated every minute like a rung on a ladder. The paper came 2 weeks later. I unfolded it at the diner sink, steam fogging my glasses. "I passed," I whispered. Then louder, "I passed." Rosa cheered, banging a spoon against a pan like a parade. My daughter clapped without knowing why. We celebrated with a slice of pie and the fancy whipped cream. For one night, the world felt gentle. I tucked the certificate under our mattress like a treasure map pointing toward something possible. I stacked good moments like bricks against the storm. Saving took months. I hid cash in coffee cans labeled lentils. I skipped the bus and walked, tracing the same cracks in the sidewalk until they felt like mine. I learned to stitch torn clothes with thread pulled from hems. Each dollar brought an apartment listing into reach, then farther, then close again. When Rosa said her cousin knew a landlord with a studio, I held my breath the entire walk to go see it. I tucked the worry away and kept working. We waited. The studio was small, slanted by a stubborn building settling into the earth. The window stuck, but the light was kind in the afternoon. There was a closet, a mini stove, and a door that locked. I turned the bolt twice and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in years. "We'll take it," I said, even though the paint peeled. My daughter ran a circle on the bare floor, squealing like it was a castle. I told myself this was not the end. I stayed. Moving day tasted like cardboard and dust. Rosa loaned us her nephew's pickup. We folded our lives into 3 boxes, 2 bags, and a laundry basket full of tiny dresses. Becky watched from her porch with her arms crossed. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. At the new place, I spread a blanket like a tablecloth and set out 2 paper cups. My daughter tapped hers to mine. "Cheers," she said. "To loud," I said, and meant it. I learned. We made rituals. Saturday pancakes cooked uneven on the tiny pan. Laundry folded on the floor while cartoons hummed. Bedtime stories whispered with the window cracked so we could hear the city breathe. I taped drawings above the cot and wrote our names on the door like a promise. In that studio, I relearned how to laugh. Not polite laughter for company, but the kind that shakes your shoulders and startles the dust in sunbeams. I kept my head down and my hope alive. Evenings, I traced the outline of her sleeping face with my eyes and practiced gratitude the way people practice scales. Thank you for heat. Thank you for locks. Thank you for clean spoons and the way her socks never match. I kept lists in a notebook. Meals we liked, bills due, goals that felt ridiculous and necessary. Someday, school. Someday, a backyard. Someday, a life where quiet didn't mean danger. Writing made the wanting feel less lonely. I carried on. I breathed. Trouble still found us. The sink clogged twice a month, and the landlord sighed like I'd clogged it on purpose. The upstairs neighbor practiced drums at midnight. Cockroaches treated the hallway like a parade route. But the door was ours, and the noise was ours, and the problems were ours. I could fix a drain with boiling water and a coat hanger. I couldn't fix my mother or erase Becky. Choosing what I could fix became a kind of peace. I chose patience even when it hurt. My daughter learned the city like a friend. She knew which corner store had lollipops in the blue jar, which block kept a cat in the window, which crossing guard told the best knock-knock jokes. On rainy days, we watched droplets race down the glass and bet on winners like they were tiny horses. We named the biggest puddle Lake Loud. I stood behind her, chin on her hair, and thought, this is the childhood I can give. I believed that tomorrow could be kinder. On my nights off, Rosa taught me to budget like a boss. Every dollar needs a job, she said, drawing boxes on scrap paper. Rent, food, savings, something small for joy. If you don't write joy down, life taxes it anyway. We put $2 into a jar labeled beach and planned a trip we couldn't yet afford. My daughter drew a sun so big it needed 2 pages. A dream took up space on the fridge and felt real. We kept working. We built a village out of kindness. Mrs. Kim downstairs watched her for an hour when I ran late. The bus driver saved us the front seat when my arms were full. The librarian waived a late fee when a picture book vanished under the couch for a month. Bring it back when you can, she whispered. Not all help was big. Most of it was ordinary and steady. It glued our days together when other things tried to pry them apart. I practiced courage. I started taking community classes at night. Math that didn't scare me, writing that did. I learned to set alarms on my phone named after hopes. Algebra. Essay. Breathe. My daughter colored beside me at the table, her tongue peeking out in concentration. We shared pencils and snacks and the kind of silence that isn't empty. When she fell asleep in my lap, I rode around the curve of her body like protecting a campfire from wind. I listened to the radiators and planned. Sleep came in small pieces. I measured rest in 15-minute blocks, in the weight of her hand on my shoulder, in the quiet that follows a long cry. Some mornings I woke to the sound of the garbage truck and felt grateful to be annoyed by something so normal. I stopped waiting for apologies from people who would never offer them. I started apologizing to myself for the ways I'd believed I deserved so little. Healing is honest math. I told myself this was not the end. Sometimes Becky called not to ask how we were, but to remind me I owed her for letting me stay. You can come clean on Sundays, she'd say. I told her I had a different life now. She muttered about ungrateful girls and hung up. I blocked her number and then unblocked it, then blocked it again. Boundaries are a muscle. They tremble before they hold. Each time I chose our peace over her demands, the muscle grew a little stronger. I held on. I stayed. The first time my daughter got a fever in the studio, I panicked. I called Rosa, who showed up with soup and a forehead thermometer, and the calm of someone who's seen worse. Fluids, rest, cartoons, she said, fluffing our single pillow. I sat on the floor beside the cot, holding a straw to small lips. When the fever broke at dawn, I cried from relief and exhaustion. Rosa washed the bowl and pretended not to notice. I let small mercies stitch me back together. We celebrated tiny milestones like national holidays. The first time her shoes were on the right feet. The first night she slept without waking. The first day I didn't flinch at the sound of a knock. We marked them on the calendar with stickers from the dollar store. Look what we did, I'd say, and she'd clap like a seal. It wasn't the life my parents valued, but it was a life we made ourselves, and it kept blooming. I listened. We carried on. On Sundays, when the diner was slow, Rosa taught my daughter to stir pancake batter and count tips in stacks of 5. Math is money language, she'd wink. The regulars became family with assigned nicknames: crossword guy, sunflower scarf, extra napkins. They asked about school, admired drawings, slipped quarters into her coat pocket. For the beach jar, they'd whisper. Strangers chose us without asking for anything back. That kind of love rethreaded my faith in people. I watched the light shift and kept going. The GED opened doors one creak at a time. I enrolled in a pre-nursing program that felt like standing on a cliff and building a bridge at once. Classes were hard. Schedules were harder. I carried flashcards to the laundromat and practiced vocabulary while socks tumbled. At night, I whispered terms like lullabies: homeostasis, aseptic, compassion. My daughter repeated the big words with pride, like spells that could protect us both. I treated every minute like a rung on a ladder. We learned. I learned to ask for help before the emergency. A neighbor watched for an hour while I took a test. A classmate drove us home when the bus broke. I left thank you notes in candy wrappers and returned favors with babysitting and borrowed tools. I stopped telling the story of my parents to everyone and started telling the story of us. 2 people building a life with borrowed ladders and stubborn hope. It hurt less that way. I kept my head down and my hope alive. We finally went to the beach the jar had promised. Not the postcard version. Ours was windy and loud and perfect. We ate sandwiches with too much sand in them and laughed with our mouths full. My daughter collected shells like trophies and declared each wave a win. On the bus home, sun-tired and sticky, she fell asleep against my arm. I watched the city slide by and thought, we did this. No one saved us. We saved ourselves. I believed that tomorrow could be kinder. Back in the studio, we taped the best shell above the cot with painter's tape and called it our moon. At night, when the radiator banged like a drumline, she'd whisper, "Good night, moon," and I'd whisper back, "Good night, loud." I didn't know the future. I didn't know how long the luck would hold, but I knew this. The door locked, the heat worked most days, and laughter lived here. For the first time, hope felt like a habit. I held my daughter and steadied my hands. Years softened the sharpest edges. My daughter started school with a backpack too big for her shoulders and a grin too big for her face. I cried in the hallway and then pretended I had something in my eye. The teacher sent home a list of supplies. We bought them one by one, pacing over weeks. She wrote her name on everything, big letters like a banner. Anna. Seeing it lined up on a shelf felt like reclaiming space. I wrote it all down so I wouldn't forget. The night before her first school concert, we practiced claps and bows in the kitchen. She wore a paper crown and corrected my rhythm with serious tiny hands. I thought about my mother's applause, thin and staged, and then forgot it. When she stood on the cafeteria stage the next day and spotted me, her whole face lit up. I clapped until my palms stung. That's what love sounded like now. Loud, offbeat, ours, and unapologetic. I watched the light shift and kept going. By the time Anna turned 7, we had routines so solid they felt like armor. Breakfast was always the same cereal, homework at the table with crayons rolling between books, bedtime stories by lamplight. Life was small but safe. I was tired most days, but it was the kind of tired that came with pride. Then, one afternoon outside her school, I saw them. My parents. Shiny car, expensive clothes, fake smiles. They weren't there for me. Their eyes were fixed on her. My mother's voice cut through the crowd like a knife. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, but she wasn't looking at me. She crouched to Anna's level, tears shimmering like some long-lost grandma. "You must be Anna." My stomach dropped. I yanked her hand and hurried away, refusing to look back. But I knew. They weren't done with me. Parents who disowned me didn't grow hearts. They grew strategies. I had no idea how far they were willing to go, but I felt the storm building. It started small. A new toy in Anna's backpack, though I never bought it. Her teacher mentioned grandparents paying for a field trip. At first, I thought I misheard. But then, cupcakes for the whole class, storytime donations, whispers among other parents about my wonderful mom and dad. Suddenly, I was the selfish daughter keeping a child away from caring grandparents. It felt like gaslighting on a public stage. I wanted to scream, but silence had been drilled into me since childhood. 3 months later, I opened my mailbox to find thick envelopes with heavy lettering, legal documents, custody petitions. My parents wanted Anna. They had lawyers, affidavits, money, and a narrative. I had a cramped apartment, a night job, and a GED. The words blurred as I read. They painted me as unstable, neglectful, unfit. My hands shook so badly the pages slipped from my grip. Anna tugged my sleeve, asking what was wrong. I forced a smile. "Nothing, baby, just paperwork." Inside, I was breaking. The custody evaluator showed up during finals week. Of course she did. Anna had strep throat and our tiny apartment looked like chaos. Tissues, textbooks, medicine bottles everywhere. I opened the door with a thermometer in one hand, my daughter crying on the couch. The woman's pen moved quickly across her clipboard as she snapped photos. Dishes in the sink, laundry pile, cluttered table. She didn't see the love. She saw disorder. I wanted to shout that survival isn't pretty, but survival was all I had. 2 weeks later, we sat in court. My parents swept in wearing pearls and tailored suits, pretending to dab at tears. Their lawyers presented glossy photos, them volunteering at school, funding playgrounds, writing checks. My court-appointed defender shuffled papers, overwhelmed. When I spoke, my voice shook, describing the sleepless nights, the work, the study, the endless care. But compared to their polished image, I looked small, invisible again, history repeating. Except this time, I had Anna beside me, and she was watching everything. The judge granted supervised visitation, Saturdays, 2 hours, in a sterile room filled with plastic toys. My parents arrived with bags of candy and dolls that cost more than my rent. Anna's eyes lit up, sweet and trusting. She'd never had grandparents before. She didn't understand why my hands shook as I watched. She repeated their promises later: ponies, swimming pools, Disney trips. I documented everything, but my lawyer barely glanced at my notes. My parents weren't just back, they were winning. After 3 visits, Anna started repeating troubling things. Grandma says her house has a pool. Grandpa promised me a pony. My stomach twisted each time. They weren't just spoiling her. They were planting seeds, making her believe I couldn't provide. I wrote everything down, page after page, praying someone in court would care. But each time I handed notes to my lawyer, he nodded distractedly. It felt like screaming into a void while my parents built castles out of lies. Then they began showing up at Anna's school. At first, I heard it secondhand. Your mom is so sweet. She brought cupcakes. Your dad read a story to the class. Parents thought it was adorable. Teachers smiled. I felt sick. When the principal called me in, I knew why. She slid papers across the desk. Anna's been falling asleep in class, she said. Is she being left alone at night? I wanted to scream. She's tired because she reads with a flashlight. Not neglect. Childhood. But the reports piled up anyway. Every tardy morning, every late pickup, every missed bake sale, it all became evidence. 3 months in, my lawyer quit. Just like that, an email. He'd taken a private job. His replacement looked barely older than me, terrified. I've never done a custody case, he admitted, but I'll try. I felt the floor crack beneath me. My parents had a polished team of 3. I had a rookie with trembling hands, and my daughter's future on the line. Court got worse. My parents filed for expanded visitation, citing my night shifts and Anna's fatigue. They brought in a psychologist they'd hired who claimed Anna showed attachment concerns. Then Aunt Becky walked in. I hadn't seen her since the day I left her house. She swore to tell the truth. Instead, she painted me as incompetent. Said I let Anna scream outside in the cold. Said I never soothed her. I wanted to protest, but my lawyer froze. I was being buried alive. Then came Rosa, sweet, fierce Rosa, who had been more of a mother than anyone else in my life. She wore her best dress and stood tall, voice shaking, but steady. That girl is the best mother I ever saw, she said. She worked, studied, gave that baby everything. For a moment, hope flickered. But the lawyers pounced. They questioned her immigration status, her education, her accent. They made her cry on the stand. My parents smiled behind their masks. I clenched Anna's hand. It was like fighting shadows. Every move I made, they twisted into something ugly. If I worked, I was absent. If I stayed home, I was lazy. If Anna looked tired, it was my fault. No matter what I said, it was never enough. I'd survived abandonment, abuse, poverty. But this felt worse, because now they weren't just trying to break me. They were trying to take the one thing I'd built my entire life around. My daughter, my reason, my heart. The breaking point came during midterms. I'd arranged for Mrs. Kim to pick Anna up from school, but when I got out of class, my phone had 20 missed calls. Anna was gone. My parents had shown up with a court order claiming it was their visitation day. It wasn't. They'd filed an emergency motion that morning. By the time I got to their house, Anna was inside. Police looked at the papers and shrugged. Civil matter, they said. My heart shattered. I spent the weekend pacing, barely breathing. My baby lawyer filed motions, but the judge wouldn't hear them until Monday. I lay awake on the floor of my apartment, clutching Anna's teddy bear, praying she wasn't scared. Monday morning, she was returned. dressed in designer clothes, talking about the pony Grandpa promised. Her innocence bruised me. My parents had stolen more than time. They were stealing her trust, one gift at a time, turning her against me. And it was working. The next hearing was brutal. My parents' lawyers painted me as unstable, irrational, unfit. They replayed my panic at their door as proof. They called Aunt Becky again. She twisted every memory into an accusation. I wanted to scream that she'd been my abuser, but my lawyer's voice cracked as he fumbled through objections. I felt so small in that courtroom, like I was 15 again, holding Anna in the cold while doors slammed in my face. Only now she could see it. Then, Anna did something I'll never forget. She stood up. 8 years old, tiny in her school shoes, but her voice filled the courtroom. "You don't know me," she told my parents. "You don't know my favorite color or the books Mama reads me. You only want me to win." Tears burned my eyes. The judge tried to quiet her, but she kept going. "Mama works hard. She takes care of me. I don't want your ponies. I just want her." The room froze. My parents' lawyers shouted coaching, but Rosa rose too, fierce as ever. She told the judge about years of sacrifice, about how she'd watched me raise Anna with nothing but love and grit. For the first time, the judge leaned forward, listening. And when Anna broke down crying, whispering, "Please don't take me," something shifted. The walls my parents had built with their money and lies began to crack. For once, it felt like someone actually saw us. The judge ordered further investigation. She looked at my parents sharply, noting suspicious overlaps in CPS reports and legal filings. My mother's face drained of color. My father stared coldly, but I caught the flicker of nerves. Custody stayed with me for now, supervised visits for them. But the war wasn't over. I walked out holding Anna's hand, Rosa on my other side. We'd won a battle, but I knew my parents. They weren't done. They never would be. Just when I thought we'd gained ground, the phone rang. A clipped voice introduced herself as Dr. McBenjamin from CPS. "We've received a concerning report about your daughter's living situation." My stomach dropped. Another home visit. I had a clinical rotation that day, but she didn't care. Failure to comply will be noted. It was happening again. They were using the system like a weapon, and I couldn't stop it. I spent all night scrubbing our apartment even though it was already spotless. When she arrived, folder in hand, she looked around with thinly veiled judgment. She opened the fridge, frowned at leftovers, measured Anna's sleeping space, and asked why she didn't have her own room. "Lots of kids share," I explained, but her pen kept moving. Then she asked about Rosa watching Anna. My pulse spiked. Rosa was family, but I knew what they were doing. 2 days later, the school called. "We've been asked to provide documentation," the principal said. "Anna's tardy record, emergency contacts, attendance." My voice shook. "She hasn't missed a day." "Yes, but there have been patterns of lateness. 7 times in a semester, 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Normal life, but suddenly it was evidence." I hung up trembling. They were building another case, brick by brick, and using every crack in my life to pry us apart. The letters started soon after, official envelopes with heavy seals that made me nauseous to open. My parents had filed a complaint with the nursing board questioning my fitness as a future healthcare provider. Another demanded mediation to revisit custody. Then Rosa called, crying so hard I barely understood her words. Immigration officers had shown up at the diner. Someone reported her paperwork from 2018 as fraudulent. I collapsed onto the floor. They were going after everyone I loved. Without Rosa, everything unraveled. Mrs. Kim helped when she could, but it wasn't enough. I missed classes, fell behind at work, failed a quiz I couldn't make up. My supervisor wrote me up for lack of commitment. The cracks widened faster than I could patch them. Every late pickup, every rushed morning became a mark against me. And in the quiet moments, Anna would crawl into bed and whisper, "Mama, are they going to take me?" I had no answer. The pressure mounted until I felt like I couldn't breathe. My nursing advisor called me in. "Your grades are slipping," she said gently. "Maybe take a semester off." a leave of absence. Proof my parents were right, that I couldn't handle it. I left her office in tears, only to find a note tucked under my windshield wiper. A PI's business card with scrawled words. "Your parents hired me. Thought you should know." My blood ran cold. They'd been watching us. The mediation was scheduled for Thursday. I wore my only professional outfit, nerves eating me alive. My parents arrived polished and smug, flanked by 3 lawyers. They spoke sweetly about concern for Anna's welfare while sliding papers across the table, photos, attendance notes, CPS reports. My father said calmly, "She deserves stability." My mother leaned in, all fake sympathy. "Or maybe she deserves to live with us." I snapped. "You abandoned me when I was 15. Now you want my child?" Their lawyer smirked, unfazed. "Our clients are only seeking what's best." Then came the gut punch, an eviction notice. My landlord was selling the building. We had 60 days to leave. "Where will you go, sweetheart?" my father asked softly, savoring my panic. I bit my lip until it bled. I wasn't going to let them see me break. Not here, not now. That night, Anna found me crying over bills. She climbed into my lap, hugging me tight. "We'll be okay, Mama. Even if we move, even if it's small, we'll make it ours." Her courage humbled me. But the next day, I found her quietly packing her backpack, her teddy bear, drawings, a beach photo of us. "Just in case," she whispered. My heart split in 2. She was 8 years old, already preparing for the possibility of losing everything. Moving day came fast. Rosa's nephews helped us into a dingy basement apartment. 1 bedroom, low ceilings, pipes rattling overhead. Anna tried to smile. "It's like a secret hideout," she said. I forced a laugh, calling it an adventure. But lying awake on the floor mattress, I knew it was just another weakness my parents would exploit. Everywhere I turned, they closed in tighter. More CPS calls, teachers questioning Anna's fatigue, strangers whispering about the selfish young mom online after my parents paraded as generous grandparents. My lawyer muttered about negotiating custody. I refused. They didn't want Anna. They wanted to win. I clung to that truth, even as exhaustion chewed me up from the inside out. 2 nights before the final hearing, Anna crawled into my bed. "Mama, I'm scared," she whispered. "If they take me, will you still fight for me?" Tears burned my eyes as I kissed her forehead. "Always. No one will ever take you away." She nodded but whispered back, "You can't promise that." I held her tight, heartbreaking at her wisdom. She was too young to know life could be this cruel, too young to brace for battle. The morning of the final hearing, gray skies mirrored my dread. I braided Anna's hair with shaking hands. She wanted to come, just in case. At the courthouse, my parents sat with their lawyers, calm as statues. My attorney whispered, "They've submitted new evidence." My stomach dropped. On the screen, grainy footage showed me carrying Anna into our apartment at 2 a.m. after a late shift. Morrison, their lawyer, declared, "This is neglect." I wanted to scream. I had no childcare that night, but all the judge saw was a tired child and a desperate mother. Then Anna stood, her small voice cut through the tension. "I need my mama." The room froze. She spoke bravely, accusing them of promises, ponies, Disney trips, if she left me. Tears streamed as she shouted, "They don't know me. They don't even know I hate ponies." My parents paled, caught in her truth. Rosa rose next, trembling but fierce. "I have seen this mother work, study, sacrifice. She never gave up. But rich people, they gave up once, on her. Now they want to buy her child." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My parents' lawyers sputtered objections. The judge leaned forward, eyes cold. "I see manipulation, false reports, pressure on schools, donations tied to influence. You abandoned your daughter at 15, and now you seek to erase her as a mother." Silence fell heavy. My parents' confidence cracked. The gavel fell. Custody remained with me. Supervised visits only, pending investigation. Anna leapt into my arms, sobbing, "We did it, Mama." Relief flooded me so hard I could barely breathe. My parents left with their lawyers, their empire of lies crumbling behind them. When the courtroom emptied, I felt lighter than I had in years. Anna clutched my hand like she never wanted to let go. Rosa whispered, "You did it, mija." But I knew it wasn't just me. It was all of us fighting together. The first supervised visit came and went. My parents didn't show. By the third month, the social worker stopped calling. Slowly, the fear that they'd swoop in again began to fade. For the first time, I believed they were truly gone. At home, Anna started checking the locks less often. She laughed louder, played harder, and slept soundly through the night. I noticed my own shoulders relax. The constant knot of dread began to unravel, leaving room for hope. Spring arrived with soft breezes and new beginnings. My nursing program allowed me to make up missed hours, and Rosa's nephew's wife ran a daycare Anna loved. Stability finally felt possible. One evening, Anna built a pillow fort in our little living room. "This is our castle, Mama," she said proudly. "And we're the queens." I laughed, crawling inside with her, realizing she was right. We'd built this fortress together. As I watched her drift to sleep, I thought about everything we'd survived: abandonment, betrayal, battles in court, and yet here we were, stronger, unbreakable. "We're going to be okay, baby," I whispered. "We always will."